Shalom, everybody. This race car, for me, signifies we are racing to the end of time. And that's what the VFI News is all about, to bring you weekly reports on what's happening in Israel and the Middle East. For we see many things going on right now, especially a rise in tourism, but concerns. Then again, Israel is no longer free to act as it wanted to in Lebanon. Iran is building a forward base within Syria on the Golan Heights. And of course, the government of Israel is once again shaking and quaking. This is VFI News. Well, shalom everybody. One more thing I want to tell you, maybe good news for the future. This weekend is the Augusta National Golf Tournament in Augusta, Georgia. And of course, I would love to see golf become a major sport in Israel. So you pray for that, and I'll pray for that also, and we'll all play together. Anyways, now down to the news. Tourists are afraid to come to Israel. And why is this? Because of recent terror attacks that took place where 11 Israelis were killed. There have also been riots outside the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem. But I want to ask all of you tourists from whatever country you're coming to Israel from, you know, many of you should be more afraid of the city where I was born, Detroit, Michigan. Or what about tourists visiting Chicago, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York? I tell you, those places are not so safe. So all I can tell all of you is come to Israel. We'll do our best to keep you safe. And so far, no tourists that I know of have been affected by these recent crime attacks and murderous attacks. And you know, Israel, there's no place like home. Concerning Lebanon, Israel no longer feels it has the control it once did for intelligence gathering over the skies of Lebanon. As we know, Hezbollah, which is pretty much controlling most of Lebanon, has new capabilities which Iran has provided, new sophisticated weaponry to be able to shoot down Israeli aircraft. So we need to really pray that we have eyes and ears over the skies of Lebanon without interfering with the civilian population, but in order to protect Israel. The Bible says, "He that keepeth Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps," and neither can we in Israel. But what is more concerning is Israel is concerned over the Iranian takeover of the Golan Heights on the Syrian side. With the end of Syria's civil war, the IDF identified a new threat brought by the demographic change and significant growth of the Alawite and Shiite population in Syria. Syria President Bashar al-Assad, who won the decade-long civil war, is now trying to regain total independence over his country. In the past 1.5 years, Assad seems to have been, they say, born again, not the born again that you and I know. He controls over 60% of the original territory he had prior to 2011. In other words, if 10 years ago the Shiites and Alawites comprised 15% of Syria's population, today they represent 40% of the population, and their representation is expected to increase. But Psalm 91 verse 5 says, "You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day." But nevertheless, it is of some concern because Iran, in a sense, is building a population demographic on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights, and this is a direct threat to Israel's existence. Now back to Jerusalem. Ramadan riots. That's right, Ramadan has already started and we're in the midst of it. And so what's happening is the Palestinian Authority governor, appointed by, who knows what his name is anymore because he's been in power for over 15 years without free elections for the Palestinian people. But anyhow, I can't even pronounce his name. But he was appointed by President Mahmoud Abbas in 2018. That is the governor of the Palestinian population who sits just outside the municipal boundaries of Jerusalem. But the problem is that they are building their own terror base, and as far as I'm concerned, the Palestinian Authority, with another name called the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, are constantly calling for the extinction of Israel and the Jewish people. This will not happen because God is watching over. One thing I'd like to present to all of you is a precious story named Pessy's story. And I want to encourage you to look at her story and her escape from the Holocaust. Patsy grew up in Leipzig and quickly bore witness to unspeakable atrocities committed upon her family and other Jews of Europe. And we've put a link to the YouTube story about Patsy, and you can find it at the VFI News. So please write what you'd like to hear more about from us. And don't forget to look up the Hebraic English songs as well that Barry and Batya, that's us, present to all of you, because we're putting the words to it. Yes, so you can sing with us every week. Just go to YouTube and type in Barry and Batya Segal, or go to that website, www.barryandbatyasegal.com. We'd love to hear your comments and hear your voices out in the nation singing in Hebrew. Yes, there's a prophecy about that. I will share that in the future. Now Netanyahu, yes, remember Benjamin Netanyahu, the Churchill of Israel? Well, he's on a comeback right now, and this is what's happening. Opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu predicted that the Bennett government will collapse in the near future, following the departure of coalition chairwoman MK Idit Silman. Speaking at the Knesset plenum Wednesday, the former premier lauded Silman for her announcement Wednesday morning that she will resign as coalition chair and quit the coalition, depriving the government now under Naftali Bennett of a majority in the Knesset. So this is what Netanyahu goes on to say. Today, Israel has a weak government. Its days are numbered. I call on more coalition MKs whose hearts are in the right place to join us. We are waiting for you. We will welcome you with honor and appreciation. You can secure your place in heaven with a single move that will save the state of Israel from this weak government. Well, that's promising more than possibly he can really fulfill. But one of the reasons is, quote, we will establish a government that will defeat terror, stop Iran from going nuclear, that will lower taxes raised by this current government, a government that will fight crime and violence in Arab communities, and that will make sure to incorporate every Israeli citizen into the Israeli success story. Well, politicians make promises they don't often keep. But I hope, whatever happens for the future of Israel, you'll join us in prayer for righteous leaders to be raised up. But we definitely need strong leaders right now to face the threats of a nuclear Iran. Finally, to what's happening in Ukraine with Israel. Zelenksy, who some people are for or against in the West, and they have their reasons and conspiracy theories, all that I can tell you is that the Putin crimes being committed and the atrocities upon the Ukrainian people of rape, of death, of murder of children and babies is horrendous. I don't care where that happens in the world. That's the outcome of war, but it's not justified when innocent lives are being murdered, such as we're seeing right now in the Ukraine. Anyways, Zelensky said Ukraine will be more like Israel in the future, not demilitarized like Switzerland after the war. And this is what he goes on to say. I think all our people will be our great army. We cannot talk about the Switzerland of the future. Probably our state will be able to be like this a long time after, but we will definitely become a big Israel with its own face. We will not be surprised that we will have representatives of the armed forces or National Guard in all institutions, supermarket, cinemas. There will be people with weapons. Well, he got that right, because you can come to Israel and feel comfortable seeing young guys and ladies with their weapons coming home from service for the weekend or taking a day off from the military. But we're used to it. We feel safe that way. I'm more afraid of some of the places in Europe and the United States to visit these days. Well, all this, and I'm quoting Zelensky again, is being discussed at the level of advisors and leaders with France, the United States, Turkey, the United Kingdom, Poland, Italy, Israel, and there are many friends who want to join. He's looking for a corridor of protection. There's much that could be said about what's happening between Russia and the Ukraine. There's historical truths, there are historical facts, both pro and against, both sides. But what I can't stand are the atrocities and the barbarity upon the Ukrainian people. So people continue to pray for the Ukrainian population, and also that the Jewish people of Ukraine and Russia and Belarus and other former nation states of the Soviet Union come back to Israel. That's what the prophets claimed would happen, and I believe will happen. Finally, Israel is launching its 7th census. since the new modern state of Israel was established. The census, according to our President Herzog said, is a vital tool for a functioning and modern state. The population census is essential so that a state like ours, a member of the OECD, an advanced state in many sense of the word, can base itself on the data for everything it does. So I ask you, is it more control over the population or essential to function? That's a good question, because statistics also gives us a wide variety of information, not prying into people's lives, but hopefully being able to alleviate poverty. And that's what Vision for Israel is all about. We want to alleviate poverty and the issues that Israelis face every day, like in your nation. So join us every week with the VFI News and pray for the peace of Jerusalem.